All right, I'm just gonna jump in. Today, I want to talk about sex. Well, want to. Well, I've been putting this topic off because it is so complex for me. But I know that this episode is so important. It's so necessary. And I know a lot of people can relate to what I have to share. So I find it as a part of my duty almost. Granted that I actually do have the ability to put words to my emotion and communicate effectively. But this part of my story is not easy to share. So I truly hope that you can be gentle when you listen, knowing that this is a part of me that I'm still learning how to navigate due to how deeply flawed and sexualized my life has been. This is a story about children normalizing adult behavior as play as a result of unhealed generational trauma. Sex is a topic most people are uncomfortable talking about publicly. And I understand that because for many it's incredibly private. For me, it's like second nature. No hesitation, easy. Do I believe that it's important to talk about? Yes. For educational purposes and for learning about it and setting boundaries. For boys and girls understanding the autonomy of their own bodies as well as understanding the emotional and hormonal effect it has on us and understanding the differences that happens between boys and girls. Maybe we would all be better off today if we had been more educated on the emotional nervous system and regulation for the opposite gender. Maybe then we would have done a better job of loving and committing in society if we truly understood each other from an autonomy perspective. I believe it's important to talk about because we need to recognize the intention of sex and why it is important to choose your partner well. Mostly, I believe it is important to talk about in the way that I am about to because we have gone way far off the rails on normalizing sex with the women can do whatever they want to do, my body, my choice, and the fact that less people want to commit in relationships today. Yet everyone craves intimacy. We have to recognize that for men to have casual sex and for women to have casual sex are two completely different experiences. Here's a breakdown of the biological hormonal influence on men and women in casual sex dynamics. Women generally release a higher level of oxytocin during intimacy, and that is a hormone that is associated with bonding and emotional closeness, which can make casual sex encounters more emotionally charged. Whereas men tend to experience a surge of dopamine and testosterone, which often emphasize physical satisfaction and achievement, potentially making emotional regulation less complicated in the context of casual sex. It is in our nature to connect on a deeper level when we have sex, particularly as women, and that's why it's so important to protect her and to honor it. I wonder if from a spiritual level that's why the Bible, for instance, encourages us to wait for marriage to engage in sexual relationship just because of how deeply connected it's supposed to be. As I've stated before, we all become a result of what we have been exposed to. We normalize what we are exposed to because no one is here to tell you differently. Because everyone is just habitual people doing what they've always done and repeating the patterns of others. There's no one there to question whether or not there's something wrong in what you're doing. Until there is. Until all of a sudden you find yourself in a different environment when someone is questioning what you have ever known. And all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where your perspective of life is completely shattered because you recognize that this wasn't normal. This wasn't the way that it was supposed to be. Or is this a way that it could have been? Is this another way to live life? This can look completely different to people. But for me, I had a realization around this when it came to the topic of sex. Because the way that I had treated sex my whole life was definitely not natural. But I didn't even question whether or not it had been until I was 25. For me, the most disturbing topic is my relationship with sex. I'm going to talk about how it started, how it continued, and what I have learned from it. Starting off, here are some important surrounding elements that I believe is important to address. I was born in 1996 in Norway, Growing up with my siblings and friends, we would play a lot outdoors, play hide and seek, go sledging and skiing in the winter, you name it. We were this generation who got to enjoy the playfulness before the full involvement of the internet. Like when I was young, we had like a big box stationary computer. It was like shared among our entire family until I was like, I don't know, maybe I was 15 when I got my own laptop, completely different generation. When the rise of the internet came, I was relatively grown. And what came with it was a massive wave of opinions and expressions around what life should be and how each role as men and women should be lived and should not be lived. There's just all of these various ways of living your life all over the internet. You see Instagram reels and people are living all of these different versions of life, and we're in awe watching from a distance, just understanding that there's so much more to life than what we are currently living. And it is somewhat intimidating because you realize that, like, could that be me? Is there any way that could be me? And then you also come to understand with all the motivational content, etc., which just triggers so many thought processes within you that there's so much more to life than the limited view that we've had growing up. As women, generations before us have challenged the norm and fought to position us where being a housewife responsible for raising children isn't the only option anymore. Women today can vote, get educated, and lead a full career while raising children and nurturing a marriage. But the needle is being pushed even further. Women can also do whatever they want to do because of what I said, my body, my choice, etc. We are normalizing casual sex, and that has been going on for a really long time now. I was a teenager when this was all on a rise, and that was really toxic for my growth and becoming a woman I respect, because growing up I had none of the knowledge that I currently have about how sex manifests in our bodies and how different it is from men and women. I know that as a generation, women don't want to be limited to what men can do. Like, we want to be able to do the same. And I understand that. We don't want to have these gender norms in the sense that we want to be managers or just be in a workforce or just be valuable in a team. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, this is super normalized today, but way back when it wasn't. And although I understand that we don't want to be limited to all of these different definitions of what men can do and what women can do, what we also have to recognize at the end of the day is that our emotional regulation and nervous system is just completely different, and the way that we handle and act and deal in certain circumstances is going to manifest differently, and we cannot ignore that. Because whether you would like to admit it to yourself or if you need to admit this to yourself, how this manifested for me was going down a rabbit hole of self-loathing and disgust, which caused a lot of shame and sorrow. This was the result of a behavior that we as society was trying to normalize as okay and free will. And don't get me wrong, I understand where the desire is coming from. I understand why women have been pushing the equality and independence. I get it. But we also have to take a step back and recognize when we have taken it too far, to the extent where it's no longer helpful to women. A lot of people aren't going to like me saying this, but for a woman to get laid is not an accomplishment. It's too easy. I mean, we can get laid off of a DTF text on Tinder nowadays. It's certainly not comparable to the accomplishment that men feel hormonally or through testosterone when they are having sex. So it is a significant difference between men and women. Not to mention that men actually have to work a little bit. They have to put in an extra effort. If you're good looking, then good for you. Maybe it's a little bit easier because of today's society. Women are getting laid left and right, and it's not really that much of a hunt anymore. But if you're a man and you're not gifted with beautiful looks, like, yeah, you're probably going to struggle a little bit more. And that is rough. And you're probably going to feel that sense of accomplishment a whole lot more when it actually does happen for you. I can understand if you believe that this is coming from a judgmental place, but it really, really is not. It is coming from a place in the depths of hell, where I have had to face the consequences of my most radical sexual behavior and how it manifested into my connections growing up. I have dealt with a significant amount of shame in my life, and it is all related to sex. Remember James from last episode? Well, him and I were watching a movie in 2021 when I was 25 years old. In this movie, two kids, a boy and a girl, maybe like 7 years old, were showing each other their genitals. It was a family movie. Don't worry about it. It's not crazy. It's not weird. This behavior is quite normal. I understand that because kids will experience curiosity and that is normal. That is just a part of life. However, the shocker for me was when I paused the movie and out of excitement and curiosity, I asked James, like, how was that first experience for you, like being exposed to women's genitalia for the first time? His answer is besides the point, but the pivotal moment for me was an understanding myself and my own sexual development was when he asked the same question back and I gave him my answer. Very nonchalant, I would share with James the following. When I was about 4 to 5 years old, a girl in my community would go down on me during our sleepovers, and that kind of went on for a while. Let me repeat that for you. When I was about 4 to 5 years old, a girl in my community would go down on me during our sleepovers, and that would go on for a while. We were the same age, and I will never forget the look on his face when I shared this, as if it was perfectly normal. It's just something that happened, you know, something that probably happens to every child. This is just the norm, you know, not at all questionable. For the first time in my life, I would look at a memory of mine through the lens of an adult, because for the first time in my life, I said it out loud. I am grown up now, and I have nieces that are the same age as I was when I was having sexual relationships with my friends. Looking at their tiny bodies and their childish minds playing with Gabby's dollhouse and Peppa Pig, knowing at their age I was having sex, I am having a terribly hard time wrapping my head around exactly that. I feel completely shattered and brokenhearted for that little girl that was me, who never got that normal relationship with sex and intimacy. I remember everything about those events. What the room looked like, what the bedsheet smells like, the smell in her room, the parents loudly moaning in the room next door. I can still hear those noises. It wasn't until the moment when I shared it out loud with James that I realized that I had been a victim of someone else's sexual abuse and that the behavior had been normalized onto me. Because what I learned in therapy is that it's not normal for kids to engage in sexual activity and normalize it as play, like hide and seek. Chances are, granted that we were the same age, that she had learned this behavior somewhere else, and as kids do, adapt that behavior onto others. I know this because I did the same thing myself. Normalizing sex from that time on with other girlfriends, and I can assure you that there was absolutely nothing normal about what we were doing. I have never labeled myself as a victim of sexual abuse because it didn't really feel that way to me. I trusted them, you know, these girls were people that I knew, grew up with, and I mean, newsflash, sex feels really good. So I didn't really question if it was bad until I saw the look on James's face when I went on to telling him all about this and saying it out loud to myself for the very first time in my life. James, of course, knew that I was a sexual person because of the way that I was joking and because of how sexually loaded a lot of our conversations would be and with our roommates. But all of us kind of found this various interest in the topic, and it was a safe space to discuss it, so we don't necessarily question beyond that. But what James and frankly myself didn't really know at the time is where that all came from, because we did know that it wasn't something that came naturally to the whole friend group per se. It was something that I normalized within the dynamic because of how freely I was talking about it. It allowed everyone else to talk about it more freely as well. And don't get me wrong, like I believe that is good. That is something good that came from it, of course. So don't think that I think that was a bad thing, that I brought something toxic into the friendship. I don't think so. But I know that it wasn't necessarily that normal for them to just engage in that kind of conversation from the get-go necessarily. I have mentioned Sadia Khan before, and her research highlights how sexual abuse impacts not just the physical body, but also deeply affects emotional and psychological well-beings. She explains that some survivors may use sex as a way to regain control or to validate their self-worth, seeing it as a form of empowerment. I deeply relate to this. She also states that by having repeated sex where you are the initiator, you have control of the situation when you once were a victim. But simultaneously, you take away the meaning of sex by having a lot of sex with different people, because subconsciously you're telling yourself that if you're acting in this way, what happened to you wasn't really that bad, because now sex isn't this big thing that is this meaningful and deep, intimate connection anymore. Now it's just something that you do and that you have power over. Her insights really show how important it is to address both the immediate trauma and the long-lasting effects it has on you, especially during healing. At age 25, I was confronted with my own reality of what sex is, and I was more or less forced to trace back all the steps to the moment when I was 4 or 5 years old to understand why I am the way that I am today and why all these years I was struggling with connecting to other people. This topic is tricky for me because it comes with a lot of darkness connected to me understanding why I struggle with getting real friends, why I struggle with men abusing my curiosity and naivete, and why I could never find a man who would just choose me and commit to me. Even so deep that it made me question my self-worth over and over and over again. What is wrong with me? Why does nobody want to be with me? Why doesn't my friends want to play with me anymore? What is it that is so horribly wrong with the way that I am wired that is repelling people? Why me? What is going on? These were thoughts that I was struggling with so much growing up. From age 4 to age 25, I had been blind to my own normalization of something that certainly was not normal. And the reason why it wasn't so clear until now is because I believe that the term sexual abuse was preserved for people who had experienced like significant trauma, like rape or other kinds of abuse that happen inside or outside the home within family dynamics, or when you were dramatically attacked in a park or whatever. I believe that these terms were reserved for people who had experienced something very dramatic. When I look back at my life with a new lens, through the lens of an adult, I feel really misunderstood as a child. I feel misread. I feel underestimated, undervalued. But I also recognize that today, this is a complete waste of time. So I allow myself in these fleeting moments to just grieve the process and heal the emotions, because as much as this happened years and years and years ago, I never acknowledged it until recently. Therefore, the healing is taking place in the present for something that happened in the past. You see, growing up in school, I remember having a lot of friends, feeling safe at school, and generally being very included in what was going on socially. I remember having a lot of fun in a lot of the school plays that we would do. We would have a lot of singing and dance rehearsals, and I remember having a lot of fun during those times. And it was kind of a community setting, but it was kind of more what was happening behind the scenes that I'm struggling with, and what might be somewhat of a defense mechanism for me too, to just kind of look at everything that was good, which is obviously positive to some extent, but not when you're trying to escape some sort of truth. Because I also have memories where I was taken advantage of. I know there's this one particular episode where one of my teachers in 5th grade would take me to the side and be like, you don't have to let these guys treat you the way that they're treating you, because what they would do is that, we were like 10, 12 years old. I don't know. How old are you in 5th grade? And these boys would be like grabbing my ass, grabbing my boobs, as if it was some sort of free property, you know? But the problem is that I had zero boundary. I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't even know that I could stop it. I didn't actually believe in my brain at the time that I had a choice. And I remember thinking that when my teacher would take me to the side and feeling utterly embarrassed and ashamed when he did. Fortunately, he would have like conversations with the boys individually and talk to them about stopping. But of course, they're boys, and I wasn't exactly good at setting boundaries. So the behavior continued on for years until I was in a relationship many years later. And the older that I got, the more frozen out I experienced myself to be. Girls that I had known my whole life didn't want to hang out with me anymore, and their friends were completely isolating me out, making it abundantly clear they wanted nothing to do with me. So my savor in those times was that I was having a boyfriend most of the time. And in those environments, I felt seen and chosen and valued and a priority. Until that stopped too. Not every relationship are meant to last, and you learn something beautiful from all of them. So yeah, but I digress. It's like, yeah, it's always been hard for me to wrap my head around all of this because it felt very unfair. But at the same time, like I said in the previous episode, it wasn't really until Arena and James started calling me out on my own BS behavior as a friend that I could really reflect on what kind of friend I had been when I was growing up. So I understand that I kind of had behavior that might repel people. And although this was probably the first time in my life I experienced anyone actually calling me out on it and giving me an opportunity to change that behavior, to stay friends, So that was the first time that happened for me, but I'm really, really grateful for that opportunity when it came. But at the time, I wasn't a really loyal friend, and I was gossiping, and just like any other teenager, I was judgmental, and that is a very likable behavior, and it pushes people away. And yeah, I can understand how things unfolded the way that they did. I was loud and I desired a lot of attention, and that was often called out as unlikable, and that too pushed people away. And what I needed, though, was someone like Karina and James who would tell myself about myself and give me an opportunity to do something about it. So yeah, it's I don't really recall that happening before in any of those friend groups. I just remember that at some point I wasn't a part of the group chat anymore, and I wasn't included in any of the girls' nights that were happening or whatever group gathering found place. And yeah, that was really devastating. Because feeling a sense of belonging and experiencing a sense of community is one of the most important things a human can encounter. When this was threatened in my life, I no longer desired life. At age 18, I was sitting alone in the middle of the classroom per my own request to the teacher. This was in high school. She knew I was no longer a part of the cliques in my class, so she asked me how I wanted to solve that. And that's how, because imagine being in a class consisting of about like 12 girls who are all best friends, and all of the rest of the guys in the class are either their friends or like their boyfriends. So yeah, it was an utter and complete nightmare for me to be in the middle of all of that. But what was I going to do? Because a year prior, I was a part of that group. And still till this day, I am not exactly sure what I did that made me so excluded. But I kind of trace it back to the unlikable behavior that I mentioned. So I can make peace with myself today, knowing that I am no longer that kind of person or friend, frankly. I believe my sexual promiscuity and openness has been a major part of me not keeping a lot of friends that I once had, either because I've ruined the dynamics with sex or because people couldn't relate to me. And I understand that they couldn't now that I know how abnormal my normalized sexual behavior was. These people hadn't been exposed to sex like that before, thankfully. This was a normal behavior to them, and thank goodness that it wasn't. But it made us not relate to each other, and often that led to prejudice behavior and a lot of gossip. I am so grateful for the biggest blessing of my teenage years, which was when I was 14 years old and met my first ever long term boyfriend. And we were together for 4 years between 14 and 18. And those years were so important to me because that was the first time in my life I experienced sex as something that was loving and caring and intimate in the most beautiful way. I actually got somewhat of a healthy view of what sex could be and what intimacy looked like. And it was really, really beautiful. And no wonder I got really attached. But yeah, I am so grateful for that time because I know for a fact that if it hadn't been for that relationship and the fact that I really, really did seek intimacy in that sense. Like sought out to be in relationship. I always wanted to be in relationships. And I know that if it hadn't been for that, I would have been a doll to share for anyone to indulge in because I didn't have any comprehension about what boundaries were or saying no because frankly I thought my value was placed in how much attention I could get from boys. So this relationship was incredibly important to me and I was so grateful for it. Although I was fairly loud in my sexual communication, I did understand that sex was a taboo topic, and I would talk to my friends about all of this, but I never really talked to my parents or sibling about it, which for obvious reasons, right? They had no idea what was really happening behind closed doors and at sleepovers, and they wouldn't until last year, the fall of, oh my gosh, it's 2025. What am I talking about? This was the fall of 2023, when I finally decided to tell my family what had happened all those years ago and how it bled into all of the connections that I made and attempt of forming in the years that followed, and why I was struggling so much with suicidal thoughts as a teenager. And I mean, and beyond that, I mean, that had been going on until, yeah, that's why I told them, because I was at a breaking point. I was really, really down low, and I think I actually talked about this in a few episodes, or it's coming in a future episode. Pardon my brain fog. But yeah, I think it was the breaking point was actually the reason why I ended up telling them. And yeah, anyways, I've always been very open and transparent with my family about a lot of things, but I was, well, I was also open when it came to like me having sex with boys for the first time, but I was in a relationship then. So it wasn't that deep in that sense. It wasn't like a worry. We took the necessary precautions, but beyond that, it wasn't so much of like a conversation, you know? Um, but my mom always knew that I was keeping something from her. But the narrative that she had been telling herself was that she had also kept a lot of secrets from her parents. So it wasn't necessarily that normal to know everything that your kid was up to. So when I told my mom this story in the fall of 2023, she explained it like all the pieces finally falling into place for her. Because my mom never understood why I wanted to die. She struggled so much to comprehend where my suicidal thoughts came from because I mean, seemingly on the outside, everything was going really well. And my mom could never comprehend why I struggle with all of this until now, until I told her all of this. And I bring that up because sometimes your healing isn't just for you. Sometimes it helps the people that you love understand why you are the way that you are too. Not that my mom ever thought that something was wrong for me, but intuitively she knew that I was keeping something from her, and she knew that it was tearing me up in many, many ways. And especially when it comes to this situation that I'm referring to that summer when I literally begged her to just let me go. Obviously, she wasn't going to do that, but she couldn't comprehend where all of this came from until I came home after having spent the summer in the US, and I explained everything that had happened all those years ago. And we sat down and had a throughout conversation about it that day, and we went for a walk the following day, and we just talked about everything and how it bled into absolutely every connection I ever had. And it really, really opened my mom's eyes too. to everything. And I think like, well, no, I don't think, I know that we are all so much better for it, because as a result of that first conversation with my mom, like we involved the rest of my family with my dad and my brothers and my sister-in-laws, and we have had really, really important conversations that followed because of that openness and vulnerability. And I also haven't had suicidal thoughts since, so that is probably the most beautiful thing that came from that. So healing really, really is powerful in speaking it out loud, because the moment you put words to your emotion and release it from your body, you're actually letting go of a lot of the things that happen. And I feel that as I'm recording all of these episodes, is that I am releasing everything from my body as I'm saying everything out loud, and it has an incredible healing effect on me, and it had an incredible healing effect on my family. And also, like I told you, I have nieces that is in the same age, and I felt a duty to tell my brothers so that he could be more aware of, like, I know that we might not see this, but this can actually happen in these environments if they're put into the wrong home, if their friend has been exposed to something that, like, they're like my niece's friends, if they have ever been exposed to something behind closed doors, we don't know that, but by talking openly and creating a safe environment where talking about sex isn't taboo, especially within the family and in the home, it can actually save so many children from sexual abuse, or at least from long-term sexual abuse. I need to make one thing abundantly clear. I carry absolutely no resentment or anger towards anyone who are a part of this story. Not the girl from when I was 4 or 5 years old, and not the friends that I lost along the way. I have made my peace with who I was in those dynamics. They were, and the fact that we all have our own set of stories that shape the way that we show up in the world. I can talk about all of this now because I am no longer angry. I can find myself being sad and wishing that I had known better, but I also realize that that's a waste of time, because I cannot change what was, but I can make peace with and understand how it all unfolded the way that it did, and that way get to know myself better. What I am in control of is the narrative that I choose to tell about it, and the attitudes that I choose to have towards it. It has shaped me into who I am today, and I wouldn't change that experience for the world. I am deeply proud of who I am, although I have often been ashamed of how it got me there. I am so sorry to everyone that I have hurt along the way, and I hope that you can find solace in knowing that the lessons were learned. Something that I want you to take away from this episode. Being a victim keeps you exactly where you are. It changes nothing. It doesn't change them, and it doesn't change the way you feel about yourself. Being a victor is what creates forward momentum, elevation, and inner peace. Getting to know yourself better by tracing back the steps to the moments that hurt your growth, even how dumb and insignificant that might feel, is not a waste of time. Walking through life unconscious and blind to your behavior and how it is affecting other people is a massive waste of time. Looking back to what shaped you is terrifying. It is really scary to put words to what's been frustrating you for years. But if you are anything like that version of me, constantly looking for something, wondering why things are the way that they are, asking yourself why it is hard to make friends or to keep committed relationships, why it's scary to form commitments, then start with you. What all of this reflection has led me to is a desire to choose myself first and foremost. No more compromising on what it is that I want from a relationship, or what kind of friends that I want, or what kind of job or work that I want. By choosing to follow my intuition and daring to dream big and not being scared of the pain or what is making me nervous or anything at all. Just being able to navigate every single emotion as they come is such a superpower. And it took me a really long time to come to peace with this whole part of my past. And I am still learning how to navigate it. And we live in a world where sex is losing its value because of how we treat it. I wish more people would reflect on their relationship with sex and intimacy, because it might just come from a broken place if you're struggling with connection the way that I am. You cannot control what other people do and don't do, but you are fully in control of what you do next. What habits needs to change? What conversations and confrontations needs to be had? Who are taking part in your life that is shaping you as a person? What kind of people do you surround yourself with? Are they uplifting you? Are they supporting you? Or are they tearing you down? What kind of actions can you do today to be closely aligned with who you really want to be? Because the only way you can get there is with one consistent choice at a time. And if you fail, try again. Seek a community that lifts you up, and always stay curious and get to know yourself better. If you want to come share your version of how your attachment style manifested itself in your love life, please email me on maxmindset@gmail.com. I can't wait to hear from you.